Blessings and welcome to today's daily devotional. Today we're in Numbers, and today is part 3 of our story with Balaam. Interesting how it kind of ends up. And it's just a real short little section in chapter 31. But first off, in chapter 30, there is a biblical principle in here that it's a law enforcement takeaway, but honestly, and it applies to us, but this applies to any and everybody. But I do see an issue with this sometimes in law enforcement, and that is not speaking up and not getting involved when you know something is wrong. This particular example is talking about a marriage arrangement. And when a husband and wife are married and a wife makes a pledge and the husband knows it's not right or she shouldn't be doing that, and he kind of sits back and puts his head in the sand, or he pretends like he didn't hear it, he's guilty of not speaking up. And it's a biblical principle. When you see something wrong or you're in disagreement, you have an obligation to speak out. Good takeaway here, good principle. But then we get into chapter 31, verse 6, which is kind of where I've been waiting for a couple of days to get to the finale of this, the ending, the last scene. 31 verse 6 talks about Phinehas, and we spoke of Phinehas. And Phinehas was a guy who was zealous for the Lord, and he saw the Israelite man taking the Moabite woman into the tent, and he takes a spear and he runs both of them through and he kills them. And God is so impressed with his zeal for God's law that he blesses Phinehas in this, blesses him with peace. And I love that. I want to be blessed with a covenant of peace. But anyhow, they talk about this war, and they're fixing to go to war with the Moabites. Balaam was trying to, or the king of Moab was trying to get Balaam to curse the Israelites, and Balaam wouldn't do it. And then Balaam was responsible for having the women go in and kind of secretly, he wasn't going to curse them openly, but then he kind of secretly had this plan where the women would entice them to go pray to the god using sex. So here Phinehas, who stopped the plague that Baal was basically responsible for, Phinehas leads this charge against the Moabites. And in verse 8 of chapter 31, Phinehas is leading this battle, and it says in verse 8 that Balaam is killed in the battle. Balaam was still standing with the enemy. He was still in bad company. You know, he had an opportunity to move out of there and move over into the camp of Israel, and he didn't take it, and it wound up costing him. Anyway, so Balaam does not end as well as it looked like in chapter 24. But then in verse 16, when they get done with the war, and I think I mentioned this yesterday, they bring out all the captives, and the women are part of the group that they killed the soldiers, but then they took the women for themselves. It's kind of a thing that the soldiers would do when they won a war or a big battle. But Moses says, you killed the soldiers and you brought back the spies, because it was the women who came into the camp and enticed the men with sex to go worship Baal of Peor. And Moses said, they're the ones that were, they had a huge part in this. Don't let them go. And so then they kill all the women. Not all of them. They killed the women that were old enough to have sex with men. The young girls, they didn't kill them. Chapter 31, verse 3. After this war, Moses puts a tax on the men who bring back all the spoils of war, because they still had people back at camp who took care of everything in camp, who got no part of the spoils of war. So Moses taxes everybody that brings stuff back, sheep and goats and cows and all the things they bring back. It's only 2%. It's not even a 2% tax. It's like a 2% of 0.2% of 1%. So it's not a huge tax, but it's enough to distribute some of the wealth to the other people, the ones that actually couldn't get up and go fight, to some of the poor and the lame and the people who needed assistance. So just a neat law that Moses puts in place. And we will see King David do something similar to this later on when his soldiers go and fight, and some of them are so tired they can't go any further and they stay behind, and then they come back and David makes this new rule of how we're going to divide the wealth. But we'll see that later in 2 Samuel, I believe. Anyway, tomorrow we're in Numbers 32 and 33. Read ahead, come back here tomorrow, and let's enjoy this Word of God. And in the meantime, you guys be safe.